Okay, so today, module one, we want to talk about concept definition. Okay, so like I was saying, when it comes to agile, waterfall, or what we talk about in the project, the bottom line is what? You have a project. You want to build something, you want to create something. You want to make something happen. And everything in life is a project though. If you think about it, even when you want to cook, it's a project. You don't just wake up and just go and just cook whatever. It take you energy. You have to have an idea. You want to know what to, let's say that you want to make fish. You want to make a fish, maybe, I don't know, a fish as a or soup or something like that. What happened? The first thing that you know, you have to have an idea that you have to make that thing. You have to give that thing a name. And that thing have to come to solve a problem. It can be you make a fish because you're on diet, you just want to eat lighter. Maybe you want to just have a salad because you want to eat salad that day. That is a project. It's the same in the software world or in the manufacturing world or in medical device world. Now that you have the project, it takes what? You have to make sure that you are the one coordinating the project. You have to define the scope of that project. If you want to eat corn, for instance, and we take a setting like in Africa where you want to eat corn, and it's not the season for that corn. That means you cannot find a fresh corn anywhere. It's not like here where corn can be found all the time. If it's like in the area where you cannot find that corn, what happened? It's out of the scope. That means you cannot reach out to that. You want something, but you don't have the resources to be able to reach out to that thing. So the scope is off. That's what they call the scope of the project. So you want to make sure that the project that you are building is within the scope. You want to make sure that it's within the time frame. That means the time that you are talking about is the time that you really want to do that project. You want to make sure that you control the cost. You want to make sure that you're not just controlling the cost. You want to make sure that you give your best to make the best soup possible, to make the best product possible. You want to make sure that if you want somebody to help you in accomplishing that, the person have the right skill. That's why you build a team. And you want to make sure that the communication between you is happening, is flowing, so that nothing is, you cannot be there's no misleading in the information. You want to make sure that you measure the risk. What are the risks of the project that I'm carrying on now? And make sure that you have all the resources needed. The same thing. So now when you have that, this is a little bit what it takes. You start, there's different phases when it comes to project. Initiation phase, where you have a conceptual idea, you just have an idea. It's conceptual. You want to ask, what problem am I trying to solve? What is even the problem anyway? What would that project better my life or better the life of my client? So you identify the need, you estimate the cost, to assess the risk. Is there any risk of you lacking something? Is there any risk of you delaying for something? Is there any leak that you don't have enough money to do that? And then you want to select the leadership. You want to select who do you need to be part of, to make that thing happen. Now you have to define, your project. Identify the stakeholder. Who are beneficial of that? Who will benefit from what you are building? Is it an external client? Is it an internal client? Now, in this normal project management setting that we talk about project charter, that means you write the scope, you write, okay, and this is going to reach this objective. This is what I want to see. This is what I want to accomplish. That's what they call project charter. You want to make sure that you have the benefit. And then you have to have a breakdown. That is normal project management. We are not talking about agile here. So when you do that, you go through planning. You have the draft. This is like a waterfall type of project management. That way they see everything from the beginning. So that is what was happening before. You have initiation, you have definition, you plan, and then you implement. But what was the problem? Why is it that it became a problem? Because when we talk about project management, most of those projects that you create, because they have everything else from, sometimes were not useful. And then I want you to picture this. An online store is a product. A user interface is a project. A computer that you use is a project or product. A software device for a play patient is a product. A mobile application is a product. Now, when you get that product now, Agile come into place because they realized that 55% of the feature on most products were not really fully used, or they were not even used at all. You see, if you have to consider everything, just imagine you building a house. You want to build 20 rooms in the house. You put all the 20 rooms, you lay all the foundation, you start building the house up. The problem on this is that before you finish building the house, you might not even need that house anymore. Maybe the house will be obsolete. Maybe you don't need that kind of house anymore. But that is what they are talking about. So you want to make sure that you build the right thing and you build the thing right. Building the right thing is what they call lean thinking, right? That means your focus is like, what am I doing? Do I really need what I'm building? Does my customer need what I'm building right now? You want to build something that is needed, not just something that they want to use. Because wanted is like, okay, they might use, they might not use. You don't want to invest on that. You want to invest on something that must be used. Now, but how do you invest? That's where Agile comes into place. You invest using the Agile way. That means small increment, and you measure. Small increment, you deliver, and then you get the feedback, and you go again, you get another increment, you deliver, you get the feedback. That what make Agile so beautiful. That what make Agile so efficient. Now, here is how what's happening in the past. And even now, on some organization, they realize that the same project that you use Waterfall to lead and the same project that you use Agile, you have 3 times success in Agile than in Waterfall. Do you understand why everybody now is turning Agile? Because of that. Nobody wants to waste money. Nobody wants to waste his time. They realize that Agile brings you 3 times the result than the Waterfall. That's why they start shifting from normal way of doing things to Agile way of doing things. So, and that is why this new world open. Now we are talking about Agile Project Manager, you are talking about Scrum Master, we are talking about Agile Coach, and you create a lot of work, a lot of job. And that's now, before when we were talking about software development lifecycle, because when it comes to software, you have a process to go through called the software development lifecycle. That means you have to know that, okay, the software will go from design to implementation. But it's the same process though, but the difference is you do it in piece by piece, bit by bit. But the same process, we all start by planning. The plan, the personnel, the schedule, the budget, make sure that you plan, then you analyze the risk, you analyze the goal, you analyze the requirement, then you select, okay, what do I need to do most? Then you design. Design means you to okay, if I need this, I need to have an idea of what I'm trying to build. If you want to build a website today, maybe an e-commerce website, or you want to, maybe let's say online clothing boutique, you want to have an idea of what you are building first. And that idea is what they call the design. You want to have a wireframe, you want to have a storyboard, you want to have a layout. Now, you want to be able to have a developer to code the idea that you have in your mind. The idea that you have in the wireframe, they have to be coding that because they have to write the code to to execute that. And then that code have to be tested to see if it's working, because you have acceptance criteria. They have to pass that code to the test to know that, okay, there's no defect. When the code is tested now, it has to go through maintenance. You have to be monitored. Is there any problem coming up? If there is a problem, do we have the raw resources to fix it? This is what is happening in the software development world. Now, when we talk about gathering the requirement here, when we talk about gathering the requirement, it means what? You want to make sure that you take the requirement from your client, and your client can be your company himself. It can be a department from the organization that you are working for. And that is why sometimes it's going to be a little bit confusing as a Scrum Master. Most of the time, if you are a Scrum Master, your job don't start here. Your job start when the project is going on, and then you enter and go for bridging the project. You go now and start bridging, helping for the implementation, the development of the project. So usually the requirement phase and all that, you might not experience as a Scrum Master. But these days, the work of Scrum Master is going above just doing the development. That means you can be a project manager. And that is why it's very important to pay attention to the requirement gathering. And when you do the requirement gathering, you are making sure that you collect the relevant information. You are making sure that, you get the feedback from different departments. You are making sure that you do you assess the need of your client. You can do that also as an Agile project manager. And that is why you will see on the job offered out there, they will say Agile project manager / Scrum Master. So now it's more than just a basic Scrum work. When you gather the requirement, these are the process, right? You can use different tools to do that, to gather the requirement. First, you have to identify the customer need. You have to ask the right question to the customer to be able to identify what do they know you need. If somebody said that it's bridging an e-commerce website, you ask them, what kind of product are you selling? What do you want to see on your website? What are the more important things that you want to see? What are the behaviors that you are expecting your client to behave when they are on your website? Every description that they are giving you, you take that as a requirement. Now, you want to understand the business process. I want the customer to go from Facebook to my website. When they land to my website, they're able to see this feature. They're able to see this type of clothes, this type of clothes, this type of clothes. And when they click on that clothes, they're able to select multiple color, multiple size. They're able to move that to the shopping cart. They're able to pay. They're able to receive the notification that they pay. They're able the code have to be able to be sent to their address. This is the behavior that you are describing. And then you as a project manager, Scrum Master, you are collecting that requirement. It could be you, it could be the PO doing that. It depends. That's why it's confusing at this point, because it depends on the way your organization is structured. In the Agile organization, normally this is handled by your PO, which is the product owner. But some organizations, or most organizations, are hybrid. That means it could be handled by you, the Scrum Master too. Or they will call you project manager at some point. It depends, but you have to be ready to deliver that. Now, you also want to know the functional and the non-functional requirement, right? The non-functional requirement, we were experiencing the same. When I was clicking on the button, it was taking forever to open. This is a non-functional requirement. You cannot see, you cannot touch, but it's a big deal. If you have to click on the button, it takes you forever. That means the speed is a problem. And if the speed is a problem, you want to make sure that your website can accommodate a speed, for instance. So those are what we call non-functional requirements. You have to capture them and you have to put them in the backlog as well. Now, you want to find the reason why the client needs this, the client needs that, because that reason will help you to identify what the client needs the most and make sure that you document everything. Actually, in the Agile section, you put everything in the backlog. But also, you have to write some detail on those things that you put in the backlog. You can write it using Google Doc. You can write it using Confluence page, whatever you choose to use. Now, you also want to encourage feedback. You want to hear feedback from others. You want to hear feedback so that you can improve on that requirement analysis, right? And then when you do that, it gives you, this is the process of gathering the requirement, right? It can be, it can be that you have a business analyst in your organization. It will make your life easier because the business analyst come with the background. If you are talking about software development, the business analyst, maybe you are developing a software for a banking, maybe the business analyst understand banking system. They can help you on that. It can be a product manager. That means somebody who understands what is needed to be built. But that product manager can be you, though. That is why you always have to have that requirement as well. And it can be, and also beside them, you want to have, usually in your team, you want to have a UX designer. When we talk about software development, you see the front-end designer, the back-end designer, that's what they call UX designer. That means UX, customer interface and experience, right? User interface have to be built and the user experience have to be built. Those are built by those guys called the UX designer. They have to understand the behavior of the client and build things accordingly. Now, software engineer, they are there to do the coding, put all the code together so that everything can flow together. Now, the second thing is what? You want to make sure that when you capture all that requirement, you want to make sure that you analyze them, right? When we say about analyzing here is what? Make sure that the requirement that you select the top requirement. You want to know, okay, this requirement is meeting this type of need. This requirement is a top priority requirement because it needs to be accomplished before this one comes. That is passing the requirement, every requirement now, analyze it, right? And this is an example, right? You detect the requirement negotiation. You want to go back to your client and say, look, do you really need this? I think you need this instead. That is negotiation, right? You want to discover the boundary. You want to say, okay, this requirement have some limitation. What if we see it this way? You are suggesting and your client, you are hearing from your client. Discovering the interaction. Do we need to build this platform before we build this one? What kind of, let's say if we talk about the e-commerce website, you want to discover with your client, say, do you need to just use PayPal or do you need your client to use PayPal and use credit card? And if you need credit card, can you accommodate Visa card and MasterCard? Those are the requirements that you are trying to break down so that you understand how far you can go. Classify them, better understand them, conceptualize them, and evaluate them. Now, when it comes to design, this is the expert. You have people in your team who understand the architecture to design it. It can be database architecture. Maybe they want their server to be on the cloud. Maybe they need to deploy everything on the cloud. And then if it's on the cloud, is it AWS? Is it Google Cloud? Is it Microsoft Cloud? How many users? So all that is going to help you to know that how much cloud do we need to be buying for what we are doing. It's not you want to ask the right question so that those designers who are the experts, they can guide you through that. If you want to install different relational database system, are you going with Oracle? Are you going with SQL Server? So those are the language that you need to have a website function, right? And that is part of your team. And now, this is an example of architecture, right? Maybe on this architecture here, you want to deploy something on the web service. That means this database have to be deployed on the web service using API. You see, that when you speak like that, you're not speaking the business language. Somebody who is in the business side will not understand you because you talk about deployment to the web services, cloud, it becomes confusing. So you have to have the ability to translate from technical language to business language. How do you do that if yourself you don't have the background? You have to ask the right question to the right people. If we are talking about database, you have somebody who understands it. They will tell you why they need to use this. UX designer will tell you how the user API function. And then you can translate that now into business language. That's your job. Be able to ask questions and make note the way you can understand it yourself. Because those things is going to come to you so much that you're wondering, but you just have to know how to navigate through that. So this is an example where maybe somebody is logging. When you log in, what happened? When you log in, you go to your database. That database, it store your registration, it store certain information. It move to the cloud using API. All that it becomes complex. But your job is not to understand all this complication. Your job is to understand who can do what. That's your job. So this is an example of architecture. We don't need to go through a lot of them. It's just for you to have an idea. It's not for you to memorize it, right? It's just for you to understand that when they say designer, those designers, their job is to put things from a client mind to the paper, just like this, so that it can make sense to them. So this is like, for instance, an example of website, right? Maybe you want to have a homepage, the product, the solution, about contact us. That is the requirement. Remember, you gather the requirement. When you gather the requirement and the client tell you that, no, page, I want to see this. I want to have a short video. I want the client to be able to also access the menu from the site. I want to be able to see the color like that. You are capturing all that as a requirement. Now system implementation. When all those pieces work together, then it has to connect together and for implementation. And we were talking about back end, front end. This is the language, but you don't need to understand it. But understanding this help you for interview, not understanding, knowing. When they talk about front end design, you talk about makeup and web, HTML language, CSS, JavaScript, because they can ask you that, okay, as a Scrum Master, what kind of language do you use for front end design? If you are able to say CSS, JavaScript, they know that you know. You don't need to know what the JavaScript, how they write it. You don't need to know that. You can say something like that, CSS, JavaScript, HTML, and then they say, okay, at least you know what you are talking about. So what else do you use for backend? Pattern, Ruby, for you is to just to take those language and just use it like that. Now, system testing. When everything works together, now somebody have to come and test it, which is the tester, right? The QA, the quality assurance engineer. They are there they can write the test case as a code to go and test the requirement. They can also do manual testing. There are multiple types of testing that will go on depending on your organization. So the idea here is to just have an idea of what's happening. And then you test the entire system to see if it works. When everything, all the pieces are together, then you test the system to see if it works. And then when we talk about automated testing automatically or automation testing, this is an example. They write the code, they build the code, they test, they release it, they deploy it, then it operates, it comes back, they monitor it. It keeps going like this. So, and this is not something that you are required to memorize it, but you must understand it so that when you come to interview, you know that, okay, this is gonna come. They can tell you, okay, so how do you do your automatic testing? What tool do you use? We talk about that later, but it shouldn't be new for you because you can at least have it on the image. That is why having an image of something like that help you to only picture it. Because otherwise it will be like, telling a blind man the color of red, right? it's hard to tell the person that is blind that, okay, this is red. How will you describe that? But when we put it like that, at least you have an idea of what it means in the real world. This is an example of testing, regression testing, understanding the regression testing, understanding, load the test, performance testing, because the software have to function. If the speed is not there, that means, there's a lack of performance. The performance is lacking. So the QA tests all that together for the entire system to work. Now, again, this is general knowledge. We are not applying any agile here. We are just understanding what's happening out there for you to have a website, for you to have an application, nothing structured. You're just applying general knowledge. The stage phases, that means when you move the application from the testing to the stage, it can be a website. You see it's a functional website, but if you don't have a link to go to that stage, you cannot access that website. That is the staging. It's go there because it's going to the production. That means it's going to where it's going to be published. It's going to be implemented. It go to the staging phase, and then go to the implementation phase. That means now they want to implement that. If this is a, let's say if it's an application, you want to know, is it an Android? Is it an iPhone? If it's ISO application or Android application, or if you want to understand, is it a window application? You want to understand all that. But you just have to have an idea, because most of us here, we are not technical, but understanding that this is what's happening in your team of engineers that you'll be supporting, it help you to ask the right question. Then system operation and maintenance, right? When you finish the development, you go to the maintenance. When there's an issue, it have to be fixed. And that's how it keep going. That's why you understand, at some point we talk about DevOps. It's a type of technology that help us to maintain those kind of operations. So we talk about all that. So this is just an introduction to tell you that agile thing is really something that help you to understand this in the more simplified way. And that is why agile come into place. And when agile come into place, it help, because agile simplify the development of the software, and then come and replace the waterfall that was there before, right? And here is a little bit why people adopt agile today, because it's adaptable, it's flexible, it's transparent at any point of time you can evaluate, it's simplified, and everything are connected together. So as you can see here, everything starts here, right? Strategy, you have to have a right strategy. Project charter, funding, goal, vision. When you move to release, you have to do estimate, release planning, backlog. Then when you have to move to increment, you want to know retrospective, review, iteration. When we are talking about iteration here, then daily acceptance, stand-up meeting, and then continuous deployment, continuous integration, refactory, integration. This is just a big idea of what we will be talking in pieces, but that is how the whole thing works. And then you test it using burn down chart, velocity chart, burn up chart. All this is to test to see if all these things are working together to deliver the result that the client needs. And when we talk about result, in the agile world, when we talk about software development life cycle, you will see that it comes in increment. This go from the beginning to the end, the same thing. So if you take one piece of software you develop from the beginning, requirement analysis, designing, implementation, testing, customer feedback, you take another one, go through the same process, take another one, go through the same process. That is why we will be talking about sprint. And the sprint is to help us to go through this multiple process and build everything together and put them together. So, and these are the advantage and the limitation of Agile. Agile is not always the best work, right? It's not always the best word. There are certain projects that are not really good with Agile. What are those projects? Some project is really waterfall based, maybe short. The project that the requirement is so clear that you know from the beginning to the end that you don't change the requirement. Waterfall is best for that. And do you know, waterfall is more simplified than Agile. Agile, even you don't know all the requirements, you can start and you adjust as you move on. But waterfall, you cannot do that. So, and everybody, you have access to this course. So that one I'm just going through. And these are the different framework when we talk about Agile. We talk deeper about that. Scrum is one of the most used, but you have extreme programming, lean software development, dynamic system development method, feature-driven development, Kanban, and much more. Those are the framework that you have. And the culture of Agile, right? In the organization that Agile is practiced, is a different culture. In the organization that is not fully practiced, it's a different culture. So understanding the culture is very important. And here is actually what happened. This is Agile for one team, right? When we talk about few team or one team, we talk about Scrum, Kanban, text-driven development, feature-driven development, extreme programming, crystal clear, continuous integration, continuing delivery. This is if the framework, if we are talking about a single team. When we are talking about multiple teams here, when we are talking about organizational way of doing or developing a software, we talk about Scrum of Scrum. This is safe. Large scale Scrum called less. Scrum of scale, discipline Agile delivery, they call that. Dynamic system development method, actually DSMN. Agile unified process, open unified process. Scrum of Scrum is the most used, just like here. So this is safe. Safe is most used. Here, Scrum is the most used. Besides Scrum, Kanban is the second most used. Scrum of Scrum is the most used as well here. Then large scale Agile in the second. So starting reading about those things is good for you, because this is like just giving an overview of what is happening. And now, discover waterfall. This is what we call waterfall, right? You gather all the requirements, you analyze this, and then you do the design, then the implementation, then the testing, then the deployment, then the maintenance. If you build a house, you are building a house, they tell you that, okay, you have the land, you look for architecture, you design the entire house, they tell you what to buy, you buy all what you need for the house to be ready. And then they tell you, okay, Mr. or Mrs., I don't know, Glory, Miss Glory, see us in 6 months for us to deliver you the house. So during the 6 months, they have not talked to you. And after 6 months, they deliver you a house where you don't even like what will happen. That is why they realized that waterfall was having some limitation. And they introduced Scrum, Agile. Agile means, okay, Miss Glory, you are building a 10-room house. What if we start building, what is the most important room for you? They can say, okay, it's living room, or it's my kitchen. What if we start building your kitchen first? We build the kitchen, maybe it takes us 1 month to finish the kitchen, and then we show you the kitchen, you love it. Then let's go. What is the second next most useful room for you? Maybe it's my bedroom. They start building the bedroom and then they send to you. So during that 6 months, you already have maybe 5, 6 different features delivered to you. And so we'll have an entire house delivered to you and you don't like anything on that. That is where waterfall have limitation. And the strength of waterfall is what? It's easy. You can follow up that when you have the requirement, is easy to implement. You know exactly the step. It's in the book. And then it's very structured. It's good for somebody who's inexperienced, but it's not the best methodology, right? The milestone, you understand the milestone. You can easily say that in the next 1 month, we can deliver this. In the next 2 months, we can deliver this. And then requirements are clear, right? when you get the requirement upfront, you don't expect your client to be changing the requirement. That means there's going to be a conflict there, which is bad for Agile, but that's how waterfall work. So now, this is, let's look at them in terms of these different, structure. When we talk about on the organization, waterfall is, things are divided into departments. In the Agile organization, we talk about team. In the people organization, we talk about specialists. That means if you are a UX designer, you don't just do your UX design. If you are front-end design, you don't do your front-end design. The back-end design, do the back-end design. You don't enter, there is no mixture of skill. But in Agile, it doesn't work like that. It is cross-functional. Everybody have to understand, have a knowledge on the entire process, but they still have their specialized knowledge. That is Agile. The process flow here is linear. You know exactly what to do, 1, 2, 3. In the Agile, it's not like that. It's cyclical. You finish one, you start again over. You do another one, start again over. Now, the project scope in the waterfall way is, in the scope is fixed. It doesn't change. In the Agile, it's variable. The scope can change based on the market. That's why they talk about change management all the time. And those are the expressions that you'll be seeing at work. They will talk about change management, oh, this have changed, this have moved, this requirement is not anymore needed, things like that. In the waterfall, it's not that much. Now, design. In the waterfall, the design is upfront. They design everything upfront and they start building. In the Agile, it's just in time. They just do enough for the specific moment. Now, after implementation, the verification is after implementation. You do everything before they verify on the waterfall. On the Agile, during the implementation, you are getting the feedback. If they don't like it, you start over again. And the delivery is after verification, right? Here is continuously. You deliver maybe every 2 weeks, you deliver something. So that is different between them. So this is just to give you, you see, this is cyclical, right? Agile is, you go, you keep going, design, define, analyze, test, design, define, analyze, test, always. Waterfall, you know that you go requirement, design, implementation, test, maintenance, period. You don't need to be going back and forth. So that is how you go. The scope for waterfall is fixed. The scope for Agile is variable. The resources is fixed and the time is fixed. For Agile also, the resource and the time could be fixed, but the scope is variable. So, and here is where we want to stop today. And I want to start with this question. In the software engineering, what are the disadvantages of a classical waterfall model? Let's see who is going to answer this question from the audience. Is it because the end product has to be fulfilled, to be fully anticipated beforehand? Is that the disadvantage? Is it because some requirements are implemented and defined in the beginning of the project? Or each phase is strictly separated, or all of our above? And they actually help to answer the question here. The limitation of waterfall is that everything from the beginning is already implemented. It's a limitation because the requirement can change. The second thing is what? You cannot just start building everything without getting the feedback. You need the customer feedback to be able to do that. So, and you don't need specialists. Specialists this day is not working anymore. You cannot be a specialist of one thing only. You have to be a specialist but have some understanding on other area to be able to do more. Okay, so it's exactly 1 p.m. I want to open the floor. for questions, for comment. We have maybe 5 minutes before we close the class, and I will be sending the homework for those who are participating in the class. So is there any question so far?